Hello, welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show, where we'll be discussing leadership, business, and human potential, inspiring you to live rich from the inside out. Unlock your creativity, stretch out of your comfort zone, break through your barriers, take inspired action, and achieve epic results. Now, here's your host, two-time best-selling author, speaker, and certified executive coach, Debra Kasowski.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show. I am super excited. I have a dear friend of mine who is in Florida joining us. She's a #1 international best-selling author. Karen Rowe is the owner of Front Row Seat, a full-service writing firm. She is an expert in nonfiction and can help you position yourself as a leading expert in your niche. Karen develops professionally written and designed books. Do it for you. Her clients include actor, a retired FBI agent, a reality TV star, entrepreneurs with online empires, and some of the top self-help leaders in the industry. Her mission is to help you find your voice, uncover your unique, powerful story to create an instant connection with you in the marketplace. You can find Karen at KarenRowe.com, and I will have these posted as well for you so that you can't miss a beat in following this lady. You have to follow her. And I'm super proud and excited to brag about her because she actually was behind helping develop Let's Be Curious, and she has an awesome book behind the cover. And I want her to jump in and tell us a little bit about what you, because this was your written book. Start off by telling us a little about that.
Sure. Well, I have been in business for, it'll be 10 years in April. And this book, my most recent one behind the cover, is the first book that I've published that was related specifically to what I do for my clients. So I had published books with a publisher, and then I'd published, co-authored books with clients and things like that. But it felt to me like I wasn't practicing what I preached. And so it was important to me to have a book that really reflected what I do for my clients and what I offer in my business by sharing that specialized knowledge with people so they could go and do it for themselves.
Awesome. And how, I know, and I didn't even ask you for permission, but I'm going to go there and you can steer it if you need to steer away. I know that you, in a previous life, were teaching.
Right.
You took a big leap in moving from Canada to the US. I would love for you to share with our audience what it was like for you to really see a vision for yourself and be scared, because I know we've had those conversations over some chai lattes. What it was like for you, and how does a person get into a place of trusting that everything's going to fall into place?
Well, those are some big questions. So what I have now is the benefit of hindsight. So looking back, what I can say is that what I didn't realize when I was in the thick of it in my life is that I had a really good life in Calgary, is where I was from, where I was living. And I was very comfortable, but I would say that I wasn't happy. I was running my writing business, but it wasn't viable and sustainable for me at that time. So I was doing a lot of side gigs. I was still substitute teaching. I was doing a lot of other things that were diluting my focus in order to pay the bills, which kept stalling me from building and growing my business. So taking the leap, first of all, I didn't realize how stuck in a rut I was in Calgary. So taking the leap had me realize, oh man, I'm really enjoying this change, and I didn't even know it. And the only way I could have known it was by taking the leap. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, because I moved to a different country, I'm only legally entitled to do what I do, to write books and edit and run a writing business. So that really forced me to make a go of it and look at what didn't work in my systems and processes. That, you know, there was a reason I wasn't having a sustainable and viable business in Calgary. And it wasn't just because my focus was diluted and I was working all these side gigs. You know, there was other things in terms of my sales process, of me having to learn how to set boundaries, how to have money conversations with my clients, how to lead my clients before they were ever even my clients. So these were all things that I had to learn and have breakthroughs in order to be able to be successful as a business owner and have this be my living full time. So, you know, I can tell you that that all worked out really well. And the other thing is that I realized I used to make, you know, this is less personal and more business, but I used to make other people responsible for my finances. So now all of a sudden I'm 3,000 miles away from home and it's up to me, right? Like if I'm not able to pay my bills, like I'm getting on a plane and moving back to Canada, because I couldn't even really teach here. I couldn't get a job as a barista in a Starbucks. Like it really, really made things real. And it also forced me to do things that I was uncomfortable doing, such as picking up the phone, having that sales call that maybe I didn't want to, you know, asking for the sale. And the thing is, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't eat, right? I wouldn't keep the lights on. So I needed that extra pressure to kind of make the diamond. So that's from, you know, the perspective of having done it and being on the other side. When I was in it, yes, you're right. I was absolutely terrified. I was really, really hoping that someone would talk me out of it. I was kind of looking for any excuse not to take the plunge. I was, you know, justifying and reasoning with myself, but my life is good here. And that's true. My life in Calgary was good, but I was really looking for extraordinary. I was looking to take it up to a different level. And
so
what
was propelling you to keep going, even though you had these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I really had to trust that it was meant to be. And I also, you know, I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people around me, my friends, my family, colleagues, you know, because I was actually looking for people to talk me out of it. But finally someone said, listen, go and you'll find out if you don't like it. And if you don't like it, you can move back. So then I realized like, oh, I'm treating it as if this is some kind of life sentence, and really just go and find out. And the other thing that kind of kept me going was you know, I'll never have to wonder if I was meant to move to Tampa, right? Like if I move to Tampa, even if I don't like it and end up moving back, I will have explored that avenue or that road and know for sure, other than, you know, being haunted for the rest of my life of, am I going to move to Tampa? And so, you know, I really did just have to trust that this was what I was being guided to do and what was in my best interests. And, you know, that if it wasn't, I could choose something different. So
in hindsight, do you feel that, you know, you always had this burning that this is something you needed to do? Like,
oh no, I mean, it wasn't at all. It was very much a surprise to me that this had come up even. And I didn't really want to move to the United States or to Tampa. Now today, you know, it's like 26 degrees. So in February, so it feels really good. Right. So now it feels like a good choice, but it really wasn't about the weather for me, right? It was about those other things that really forced me to grow up, basically. So no, it hadn't been a burning desire, but what it had been was this kind of niggling dissatisfaction with my life of, I used to hear this like, is this all there is? And since I've moved to Tampa, I don't hear that anymore. Like it's the first time I intentionally changed the course of action of my life, rather than letting things happen to me and being a leaf in the wind. I chose this and really just did a huge pivot. So that is what I would say, you know, to the listeners, is that if you feel like things are happening to you and you're not maybe empowered or in charge of either your life or your business, you can choose something different and you can choose to create that. And in my case, really all the kind of stars aligned to have me be here. Everything really worked out for me really quickly from, you know, once I actually chose it, things like I was able to move out of my apartment and my friend let me come and stay with her for 2 months rent free. And I got to sell all my stuff or get rid of it really quickly and easily. Like it just really was almost effortless. And the other thing I would say is the hardest part was kind of getting on the plane. You know, once I was on the plane, the decision was made, right? So it was kind of like out of my hands. So what I would say is, you know, the whole feel the fear and do it anyway is, I mean, is a cliche for a reason, because I was terrified and I still took the action. So that's what I'd say is, if you're hesitant or afraid, you know, even if it's with book writing, you just have to show up and take the actions. You do not have to figure out how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen. You just have to do your part, which is take the actions, which is what I did. I booked plane tickets. I, you know, moved out of my apartment and things like that. And, you know, I'm not going to deny that in that adjustment period of getting on my feet, like I had a lot of sleepless nights. I had an empty fridge a lot of times. But, you know, doing that in the short term ultimately has led to years and years of not only contentment, but financial stability as well.
Yeah. And I know that a number of my friends have started doing some of the publishing with you as well. So that's fantastic, because they've been messaging me saying, Deb, I have a book for you. So it's awesome. And I would love to just dive in. Does every business need a book? Like, I look at some of my friends who are speakers or coaches and psychologists, and I'm like, you need to talk to Karen.
Yeah.
You have a message, you have a core message that people need to know in the world.
Yes.
So do you believe every business needs a book?
I do, but, you know, take that with a grain of salt. That I'm biased, of course, that is what I believe. But I will say a caveat of, if your business is still in startup mode, I don't believe that you need a book yet. And that's simply because I don't think, you know, probably you don't have the resources, not just time, but money to invest in getting a book done. But also, in my experience, startup companies or someone just very, you know, in the beginning stages may not have enough case studies or proof of concept yet to write a book. And that depends on the person, you know. So kind of what I say is, even if you're a startup mode, if you happen to be a serial entrepreneur or have been running businesses for more than 5 years, for the most part, that particular type of author gets it, right? They get the value of a book as a marketing tool, and they often have the expertise or the team to, you know, be able to leverage it and productize it as is necessary. But, you know, it's stressful. It's very vulnerable work writing a book, and it's time consuming. And often in startup mode, you need to be spending that time getting your cash flow in place, building your client base. Like, that's where you need to be first and foremost. But once you're past that stage and you've got some cash flow and revenue, and you've got, like you said, Deb, this passion and message to share that's not really reaching as many people as it could be, then yes, you know, that's the time at which you could leverage your business or leverage your book to help you grow your business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know some people will say, oh, you know, that book, it's just going to be a big money maker. And truly, the book is more the glorified business card.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that people can take home and get to know you as they read the pages.
Yeah. So I love to say that a book is like your ambassador, right? So it can go many places that you can't go with your clients, like including on vacation, in the bathtub. So it gets to be your advocate and speak for you when you're not even there and when you're sleeping, right? And the whole idea of, you know, my book, I still use it, every day to help me with clients and to help them understand me and create relationships with them. And I wrote that 2 years ago, and I still get revenue from it 2 years later. So in terms of leveraging your time, doing something once and having that pay dividends for you, a book can do that. That being said, there's really no money in books for the most part. You know, I hate to kind of burst your bubble, but those days are over in terms of the days where you would get huge cash advances and get flown around on book tours and things like that. Where the money is now is really in the back end. So how you leverage it to bring yourself new clients, build and grow your list, get speaking engagements, etc. That's how you do it, right? So for me, for example, I really only need one VIP book the beach client to have gotten the return on my investment? And I'm sure we'll get to this later, but that's one of the questions you want to ask yourself when you're in, considering if you want to write a book, is how are you going to leverage it to get your return on your investment, right? Because if you can't get a return on your investment, then do something else that will get you a return on your investment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how many clients would this book need to bring you to be able to get the return on your investment? Those are a few good questions to ask yourself.
So tell me, when people are looking, because I have traditionally published and I have now the self-published book, but from your perspective, should people be looking for the traditional publish, or is self-publishing a lot more of the norm that you see today?
Well, I do, of course, see more self-publishing, but that's because I'm a self-publisher. So what I say is, if you have the opportunity to work with a publisher, go for it, but don't spend your time trying to pursue a publisher, because it will be the same amount of time, effort, energy, money to just publish it yourself. So, one of the things that publishers are looking at, when they want to determine whether to publish your book is, one, is it a great book? And two, do they believe that you can sell enough copies to make money, including like the level to which you can help them put the book on the bestseller list? And my personal opinion is, if you're doing that for the publishers already and you already have a large platform and a large following, why not just do that for yourself? The other thing a lot of people may not realize is that if you publish with a publisher, you're looking at anywhere from a minimum 12 to 24 months before that book gets onto the market. Mm-hmm. And often you don't have that kind of time. Your topic or subject area might already be obsolete and on the way out in 2 years. So sometimes I have clients that have hot topics you need to publish now, otherwise you're going to be behind the curve and that topic is no longer going to be relevant. So, that's what I would say is, the speed to market, will that make a difference for you? And if so, then self-publish, and spend your time and resources to market the book and get the clients for yourself rather than supporting the publisher to do it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you have a very unique approach, and
yes.
I'm jealous because in my process for writing, I wrote the book and I said, hey, can you guys edit and clean this up, help me with the cover and all that?
Sure.
Which I know you do as well. But I tell you, it's so tempting when I hear people going to the book on the beach program. So tell us a little bit about your process.
Sure. Well, so really what I realized is that, the biggest kind of problem with writing a book is typically people have one of three problems that they're dealing with. First, they're not sure if the content they have is any good. Second, the passion they have for their subject matter just isn't translating onto the page for whatever reason. So although they may be able to talk about their book, and their idea and their subject matter, when they sit down to write, there's some kind of disconnect, right? So they're not sure where to start, what to include, they get overwhelmed, and so they just get stuck. But really what I discovered is kind of the biggest problem of most of my clients is that they're just too busy or successful to find the focus time required to sit down and write on a regular basis. So once I realized that that was really the biggest issue, I created kind of like a time hack, which was called This Book at the Beach. And that's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's me and the client in a hotel room at the beach for 3 days. I am interviewing them. And so, the second problem of them, getting overwhelmed with what to write isn't an issue because I decide that for them, right? So I'm listening to them. I'm recording everything they say. I'm listening for what is really unique to this individual. What have I not heard and read a million times? And, as you know, Debra, the other kind of issue with writing a book is that it's not a revenue generating activity. So you either have to take time away from your billable hours, or you have to take time away from your evenings and weekends with your families, most of which, we don't want to do either of those. But most people can find 3 days, come to Florida, especially this time of year. It's very tempting, right? and just get that done. And then the whole idea is that I get everything I need from the client in those 3 days, so that then they can go back to their busy lives and their families. And then we begin the real work and the heavy lifting of, okay, let's now put this into something that's going to make sense to other people. We do the editing and we project manage it through all the phases, including cover design, layout. We upload the title, which is publishing, and put the book in your hand. So that's been, as you can imagine, very popular. And the other thing I say is, if you are not wanting to sacrifice your family time, I always invite my clients to bring their families with them. The idea being that we can still work on their book, and then at meal times they can go, kiss their kids at the pool or have dinner with their wives or spouses in the evening and not have to sacrifice their family time. Now, I will say I haven't yet had one person take me up on that offer. Most of them are like, no, it'll be a distraction. If I bring my kids, I'm not going to want to work or whatever, So, but that is, that's an opportunity to be able to kind of have it all and do it all, without too much sacrifice on your time.
So is it an intuition, or how is it that you can find that uniqueness and pull that out of their story?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, at this phase, it is an intuition, but it's an intuition based on 10 years of doing it, right? And based on probably 300 books written and published. So, but yes, there is a certain kind of creative element to it and I have a structure, we still do an outline. I still do an in-depth analysis of like, who are we writing to? Who's your ideal reader? And then I do have a blueprint that I follow. And in just oversimplified terms, it's that your reader is going to have a problem that they are suffering from that causes them to pick up the book and buy the book and read the book. And you're going to outline that problem. And then you're going to talk about why you're the best person to solve that problem. And typically it's because you've already overcome that same issue. And then you solve the problem, right? And so you really give them all the information, and the whole subtext of the book is like, holy crap, I need to hire Debra. I need to hire Karen, because there's no way I could do this on my own. And one of the really interesting things about this day and age is that, I get some clients that get really nervous about like, this is my best stuff. This is everything I know. Like, someone could take all of this information and do it for themselves. And that is true, but only about 2% of people are probably actually going to read your book, and only 2% of those people are actually going to implement it. And anyways, they aren't your client. The do-it-yourselfers are not your client. And it's no longer the information age, right? So the information age is gone. It's now the collaboration age. So now what we're offering as services as business owners is the opportunity to work with me and collaborate with me. You can have all my information, but in order to hire me, and have time with me, that's what you're hiring me for, right? And
Yeah,
to do the work. Yeah. So, and I always give Tesla as an example, right? Like Tesla just gave up all their blueprints for their cars and everything like that. GM in the 80s would never have done that. But, he's not, it's collaboration economy for him. It's not about information. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Even if people copy, like I was listening to an interview with Tony Robbins the other day, and he said, in the beginning, there was a guy who ripped off his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, at first, he's like, I don't like this feeling. But the point was that he actually used the stuff.
Yeah.
There's a thing of ripping it off and not doing any with it. And he said, I actually think he helped a few people's lives.
Yeah.
So I actually, when I think about it, it's okay.
Yeah.
But they'll never be able to present it in your way because your style, who you are, how you get in deep with people. People can't replicate that part of it.
Right. Yeah. And I don't really believe in competition either. That's just my personal view. Not that I don't have competitors, but just that they have their unique, USP and their special sauce, and I have my own. And I'm in a number of business groups where there are other ghostwriters and things like that. And, we have kind of a gentleman's agreement that we both, we don't talk down about one another. We just talk about, well, this is the way I do it, and this is the way this person does it. So you choose which of our processes are going to be the best for you, because ultimately I want clients that love working with me and love my process and believe in it, and I don't want them to be coming to me, I don't know, resentful or anything like that. Right. So like if my competitor is a better choice for you, then they're a better choice for me too. Right. Yeah. Cause ultimately what's best for you is what's best for me. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And because there's 7 billion people in the world, we can't serve everyone, but it's best to find the right fit.
Yeah.
Than it is to just have someone. It's just like when people are getting clients initially, they want to work with everyone. And I've learned, and you probably learned as well, we don't want to work with everyone. We want to work with only the right fit. And those people who really appreciate how we do things.
Exactly.
So as you know, I am a curiosity girl.
Yes.
So how do you disseminate, because you have a team that works for you now, not just yourself.
Right.
So how do you disseminate after you've done all this interviewing? How do you get people to understand what it is that you see as the vision after working with individuals? So when you do your book on a beach, you got the 3 days, and then you have your team to help you with the other parts of it. How do you communicate that to everybody else?
Well, first of all, the first thing I do is what I call creating who the client is for me with everyone on the team. So I do introductions where it's like, okay, here, Debra, meet Amelia, and I will basically sing your praises and love you up. Here's what I love about Debra. Here's what attracted me to working with her, either personality-wise or subject-wise. Here's how I can see we help her. Often there's, a personal relationship, like, oh, I met Debra at an event in Calgary, and she lives in Calgary, and, all this sort of thing, right? And so I create that, and I had actually one of my editors say, man, I love how you do introductions, because then they get all caught up and enrolled and like, man, I love Debra. She's great. And so if they have that context of being really excited and jazzed about the content and the subject matter and the person, then they're going to bring their best. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is I would say I trust my team members to bring their unique approach to it. So like my editors, I tell them what our goal is, but then I let them come to me with like, hey, here's what I think would be the greatest structure. Yes. And then I'll talk to the client and say, what do you think about this? And they'll say yes or no, but I don't try and control my team members and say, hey, I want you to edit the book this way, because I've hired them for their expertise. I don't want to micromanage them. So I let them bring to me what they feel is best. And in general, I'm like that with professionals. Like if I go to my hairdresser, I will let them give me the haircut that they think is going to be best, which is way more than me trying to tell them how to do their job. Right. So that's what I do. And then, I'm hiring people that, I've now had editors with me for probably 3 or 4 years, that I just, we know our styles. We love working together. And I adapt to their working style. So first thing is I pay them whatever they ask me to pay them per hour, right? Or per project. So whatever payment terms work for them. Secondly, whatever work terms work for them. So for example, one of my editors likes to take the transcripts and insert them herself into the working draft, whereas other ones prefer that we insert them and put them where we think they go, and then they edit those. So just little things like that, that to make it easy, kind of just be like a low maintenance date, right? And then also having that flexibility with the clients, right? Like some need a little more hand holding, some need firmer deadlines, some, just need to be left alone until it gets done. Some need flexibility in dates. So it's really just not being too rigid. My commitment is to get the book published. So kind of like by any means necessary within reason is what's important to me, right? Like I just want everyone to enjoy the process as much as possible, because it's already a painful process. So,
I have to tell you, it's very streamlined process, because I did not feel any gaps at all. It was so smooth, and I was just like blown completely away.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anybody thinking of writing your book, because the next question is, how do you know if there's a book in you?
Oh, yeah.
Like when I first got into, somebody said, well, how did you know you're going to be an author? I didn't.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I didn't.
Yeah.
The book was co-authored with our colleague, Charmaine Hammond, and it was for coffee that we started talking about a book. But, and then the other ones kind of evolved, but I would love to hear your experience.
Well, I personally believe that everyone has a story to tell. And it's, again, not being too attached to what that story is. So I have people come to me at all phases of the book process, Deborah. Like sometimes they come to me like you did with your first draft done and they need editing and publishing. And you had also already published with a publisher. So you were clear you wanted to self-publish. So in that case, it's like, okay, she's clear what she wants. We just need to deliver those terms. In other cases, I have clients that come to me sometimes with an idea, but not fully fleshed out. So we can do a strategy session. We also have a viability scorecard. Sometimes I have clients that come to me with multiple ideas, 3 or 4 or 6, and they don't know where to start. We can also help them through that. And I've even had clients come to me with no idea, like they had a business coach or, a mastermind group tell them, you need to write a book for your business. And then I'll have a conversation with them. Because, first of all, the kind of the want and the will has to be there. And then it's the same thing, just asking, about curiosity, asking questions to find out where their interest is. Like, what are you passionate about? If they're business owners, like what had you start your business, and usually, what's your story of origin? Like, tell me, what's your story? So they'll tell me what that is. And usually something starts to emerge from that. Like, and that is a little instinctual where it's like a little light bulb or a little snap of the fingers where it's like, oh, what's that? And then you back up, well, tell me more about, you said X, and it might be something about their childhood. It might be something that they didn't really even put much weight on, but is maybe just a little, Julia Cameron calls it the vein of gold, right? So you're looking for that little thread that could bring it all together. So.
And something that they think is insignificant can have a huge impact when you realize it's something that's not talked about that really will make your story stand out.
Yeah. And for the most part, I think that people don't always know. I mean, I have the benefit of hearing people's stories every day for 10 years. I never get sick of it. But some people have really innate talent that is just second nature for them. It's like the air we breathe or a fish in water, and it's saying what water is so normal for you that it's not something that you would think would be teachable or that other people would be interested in. So it's just offering that sounding board of, oh no, that could be something. But then it's, it's similar. You just kind of have to trust the process that we're going to find something. And I've never not found something. Yeah. So
there's a specific, unique moment that stands out for you that is one of those ones where you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a teachable moment.
Oh gosh, all the time. But the one book I'm thinking of is I published a book last year with a client, and she had a very interesting life, and she had multiple different stories that were seemingly unrelated. So she was the youngest woman to dive the Titanic. And she runs a consulting service, a successful consulting business. She'd also had a very interesting childhood with a very prominent father who is an alcoholic. And so she'd had some great insight and learning from her upbringing and relationship with her father. Then she dove the Titanic, so she had, and so she came to me and said, like, I've wanted to write a book for years. She was clear, I don't want to write a whole book about the Titanic. Someone's already done that book and they've done it way better than I ever could. So, but it's still part of my narrative, right? So how do we include it? And you know what? I said, I don't know yet, right? I can't possibly know from the beginning. We just have to wade in. And we did. And one of the other things that came up is that, one of the things she really believes in firmly is in mentorship and mentoring the women kind of coming up behind us. And we eventually thread it all together into a book called Jumping the Queue, Achieving Great Things Before You're Ready. So she kind of realized, like, look at the traits of millennials, and some millennials are criticized for this in terms of like, they don't wait around for opportunities to come their way. Like they'll see a CEO on LinkedIn and pick up the phone and see, oh, I see you had an opening and I'm perfect person for this job. And if something isn't working for them, they'll move on to the next thing. So that's very different from my generation. And so, this author realized, like, I've been a millennial before it was a thing. Like, I've been jumping the queue my whole life. And then she was also like the youngest museum director, I think. So just like really just interesting stories. And she's like, I don't know how these are all going to fit together. And, through doing the work and having the conversations, we found a way that is still now something that she can easily and readily use to build and grow her consulting business. So she was really, and I was really proud of the work we did, because that took some work. Like, it wasn't obvious right away. And the first draft, I think she was like, this isn't it. This isn't right. And I was like, okay, let's go in again, So that's one that's just comes top of mind to me.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And it's one of those books, like, just when I think jumping the queue, it's going to be one of those books that people can pick up again 2 years later, use it pull something out of it that they can walk away with.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we talk about writing books, and sometimes people are like, I want to write it myself. And then they say, well, no, I think I need ghostwriting because I just feel like I don't have what it takes to write, or I'm too busy. But then they're like, am I cheating by doing that?
That's a good question. I mean, and it's a pretty common one I receive. And what I'll say, first of all, is a lot of people don't realize that about 40% of the books on the market are ghost written. And if you're not familiar with what a ghostwriter is, it simply is that someone else is doing the writing and editing and putting your name on it. So I kind of affectionately refer to this as all of the glory, none of the work. But a true ghostwriter is someone that, you would basically have kind of a meeting with them and say, here's my idea for the book, and here's any kind of research or my post-it notes or, whatever content I have, and you hand it over to them and they disappear and they go and work in the writer's cave, and they come back to you perhaps, and not that you don't have, you'll have milestones and dates and stuff, and they'll come back to you with a few chapters, maybe in a couple months, and say, here you go. And you would say yay or nay, and then they go away. And basically they write the book without your involvement. That's a true ghostwriter. I am more of a collaborative author in terms of it's still your content and your insight and your message. I'm just making it sound good on paper. So, that's really what I see, is that I'm a vehicle or a channel to, put your words on paper, because, your message is not going to make a difference for people if it's stuck in your head and not on a piece of paper and in a book, and of course there's other mediums like podcasts and things like that. But, that's really what I see as my job, is just a vehicle to help you get your message out. So that is what I don't, and so I don't think it's cheating. I just think it's a smart way of leveraging your time, so it's freed up to go and work on your unique genius, right? So
it's all about return on investment, right?
Right. Yeah.
So how does one go about hiring editors and ghostwriters? Like, where do you find them? Like, if people didn't know about you.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, there's now with the internet, it's easier than it ever was. I mean, the ironic thing, of course, about ghostwriters and editors is that historically we're quite introverted, right? So we do just want to kind of be stuck, in our little caves, doing our work and not have to work with people. But you can absolutely look online. There are all kinds of organizations that support writers, like the National Writers Union. And depending on what country you're in, you would want to look at a nationally supported writers union. There's a lot of information on there in terms of what typical rates are, what to charge, how to hire them. Also, in my book, I have a whole chapter on it, what questions to ask, how do you hire an editor, what can you expect to pay, what are the different kinds of editing, because of course, depending on the level of editing required, there's really light editing and grammars and typo, and then there's substantive editing where we're getting into the structure of the book and things like that. So there's a real overview on how to hire the professionals and how to work with them and what to expect. So that would be my advice, is to really, and also set yourself a budget and get information on kind of what the rates are in the market, so that you have a fair idea, first of all, if that's something you're willing to pay. Sometimes people realize like, oh, actually, I would rather just write it myself and save myself the money, you know? And I would definitely recommend interviewing more than one, you know, especially if you're hiring an editor, maybe talk to 2 or 3, and I have a number of questions that you would want to, you know, go over in terms of setting some communication and update expectations, like how, you know, what's my level of involvement versus what can I expect from you? How often can I expect to hear from you? You know, things like that, right? And then understanding that everyone does have different payment terms. So with editors, sometimes they charge by the word, sometimes it's by the page, sometimes it's by the hour, sometimes it's by the project, and all of those choices are valid, you know. And so I just recommend that you ask them, why do you charge that way? And they'll typically have a reason why. And I have never really run into anyone that didn't charge fairly. Especially in, you know, in the editing world, it's just a lot more work than people realize. And it's slow progress often, right? So, but it's also where all the heavy lifting gets done. It's kind of where the rubber hits the road. And so it should be kind of the most expensive aspect of your project. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen, I know for myself, and I've sent you pictures that when I started writing this last book with you, I had mind mapping all over my basement walls. I seconded myself to the university library, so while my daughter was going to university, I'd just go with her during her study time. And
oh, that's fun.
I didn't know anybody. I couldn't get distracted.
Yeah.
For hours at a time. And what are some strategies that you tell people when they're starting to write their book, and without losing that momentum? Because I know I had to go on a regular basis, and sometimes I did need time away from writing. Say, okay, I just need a break from looking at this because all the content seems to be looking the same.
Yes. Well, my first thing I would say is know yourself. So know your work style, and know if you create a structure that's going to work for you. So my first 2 books, I did the same as you, Debra. I sequestered myself in what I call like a sensory deprivation tank, which was, I was living in Calgary at the time. So I went out to the Badlands outside of Drumheller to like this deserted coal mining town, and there was no internet and no cell phone reception. So I rented a little cabin literally in the woods. And, you know, I worked out there because I had to free myself from all of the distractions, because I am really a master procrastinator, or I was at the time. And that was what I needed to be successful at it, was just complete and total isolation. And the other thing is that I hated it, right? So that was also spurring me forward to actually get it done, because I'm like, the sooner I get this done, the sooner I can go back home. And I only did it for me, I think it was 6 or 7 days the first time. But then once I created that base, I went back home where I had the creature comforts, and I just maintained the routine. So that worked really well for me. Now I have much less struggle with it. So I put in headphones, and I have these like binaural beats things that's around writing and inspiration, and I time my writing sessions. So it's called the Pomodoro technique, and what I found works for me is 45-minute sessions of uninterrupted time. So that means I'm not self-interrupting to check my Facebook or my email. I've got my phone on airplane, you know, and I work no matter what during that 45 minutes. And you know, and then I take a 15-minute break, and then I do another 45 minutes. And if I can get between 2 and 4 sessions of those done a day, that's enough. Like, so don't overestimate how productive you can be, because that's intense focus, and like you're really using kind of high level brain power there. So I end up being kind of, you know, my brain is mush if I do too much of that. So, but if I can get 3 or 4 hours of real focused time completed, that is far more productive than 7 or 8 hours of me, you know, doing multitasking, because we're actually terrible multitaskers. So that's, you know, but I know, based on your situation, if you got kids in the house, it might not be appropriate for you or doable for you to go sequester yourself for a week. So I always ask my clients who are doing it themselves, what will work? I've had clients that get up earlier in the morning. They're getting up at 4 a.m. so they can write for a couple hours before the kids wake up. If you're not a morning person, don't do that. Like if you're a night owl, can you, it's just looking at where can you create time in your schedule in a way that's actually going to work. Like if you're going to put it in your calendar and then hit snooze and not get up, that doesn't work. So switch gears and find something that does, and yeah, the momentum is the key thing, because if you're writing every day, even if it's only for 7 minutes, it's top of mind. So you're remembering what you wrote yesterday. If you take a 2-week break from it, then you're like, oh man, it's almost like you're starting from scratch. You're like, I don't remember what I wrote. So then you're reviewing what you wrote, and then you get stuck in review mode where you're just editing kind of the same 10 or 50 pages and you're not actually getting the book done. So your responsibility when you're doing the first draft is a brain dump. You're just getting everything down on the page. You're not editing. You're not judging. Oh, this is terrible content. Like just ignore those passing thoughts and just get it done. Because all of that other stuff is actually editing. So
and you're not going back and rereading what you wrote.
No, because that's just a kiss of death, because it's going to be terrible, right? So then you're going to be like, oh God, that's terrible. Who am I to write a book? And then it's just this downward spiral, right? So yeah, so I love that you went to the library and you didn't know anyone, and you're not in a coffee shop running into people and socializing and stuff like that, right? So that really works for me, is that kind of deep isolation. But I only did that for my first 2 books. After I established the routine, I'm able to create that isolation in my office now. And the other thing that really worked on the first 2 times is that non-negotiable external deadline. So I had a deadline with the publisher and it was fixed. I could not move it. So some of the ways that my clients have created this is by setting a book launch date, renting the venue, putting dollars down. And I had another client who had a sponsor. One of her clients sponsored her book launch. So all of a sudden someone else is putting dollars down. That was really effective. Yes. And then another client who hosted events had his book and sold books instead of tickets to his event. So I think you had to buy 3 books for a ticket. And if you wanted VIP, it was 5 books or something like that. And he had a very aggressive deadline, but we met it because there was just no room for negotiation on it, right? So, that works really, really well. It's one of the best things I know of, is that non-negotiable external deadline, because you can tell everyone and you can set that deadline with yourself and your family members and even your staff or, colleagues. But unless there's, a real hard end date, and that hard end date means like, oh, and you really want to go to bed, or you really want to have a glass of wine, except that you have to get this writing done. So it means that you're making choices that will ultimately support you getting that deadline met.
So those are some really good strategies, especially that isolation piece, because I know there's times I'm like, just to have the world stop for a moment, right?
Right.
So that you can really focus in. And I know 45 minutes is my Pomodoro time.
Yeah.
And there's many online timers that will ring off that 45 minutes. I initially started with 20.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, just right in the thick of things. I'm like, this does not work for me. I can't take a break now. I'm not going to allow myself to.
Right.
But 45 was my ideal time as well.
Yeah. And one of my other great tips about that is not so much necessarily in the first one, in the first 45-minute session, but often when I'm in the second or third one, I get to a point where you're naturally ready to stop, except I've still got 15 minutes on the clock. Here is what separates the men from the boys here, is that you don't stop because you still have 15 minutes. So you find something else to write about, or, and keep going. And the great thing about that is that when the 15 minutes is up, then you stop. right? So there's, Hemingway had that well-known quote about when you're going good, stop going. So some people then, they get on a roll. They're like, man, I was on a roll. And they're writing 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 and they're writing. And then they got nothing left to say and they stand up and walk away. And then they have nothing else to say. So there's nothing pulling them back to the page. Right. So that's why you time yourself. So then you get to the end of that 15 minutes, and you're like, oh, I wasn't done. So first of all, if you have other writing, sessions, you can take your break and then you're excited to come back. But if you're done for the day, then you're thinking about that. It's like your brain's on the hook to come back the next day. And then you sit down, you're like, oh man, I'm going to finish this. And that's how you build momentum, is to not, stop when you feel like stopping. You're living by the timer, and to stop when you feel like writing, which is really counterintuitive. And I still have to really, set that boundary with myself, because it's tempting, but it works, because that's how you build the momentum.
Well, I have two final questions for you, Karen.
Okay.
What is the one book that has influenced you the most?
There's been a couple, but I will probably say the one that's influenced me the most. There's a book I wrote with a client called Breeding Gazelles. And he, one of the things he says in the book is that your business is only as strong as your weakest link. And that haunted me for a long time. And what I realized for me is that my weakest link was in my bookkeeping, accounting, and numbers and things like that. I really had an ostrich kind of take to it that I didn't want to know. But reading that book, I realized that my business was never going to thrive and grow as long as I wasn't dealing with those things I didn't want to deal with. So that was Breeding Gazelle, Advanced Growth Strategies for Your Business. And the client is Dan Bradbury. So what I'm very fortunate about is that I always get to write books that I probably need to read the most. So they always seem to kind of find me. And there was a time there where I was doing just a finance book after finance book. And finally, after my fifth one, I'm like, oh, this is for me. Okay, I got it. I got the message. So I actually started implementing some of the things that my clients were writing about in their books. And when you start implementing what you're reading about, that's when it makes a real difference. So,
yeah. So my next question for you is, you're busy writing all these books. Do you actually kick back and read any?
That's funny that you should ask, because I definitely read less once I started doing it for a living. And so this year, my New Year's resolution was to read more for pleasure. So I'm taking that on this year, and I'm aiming for a book a month, which is, I'm a little embarrassed to admit, because that doesn't seem like much at all. I know some people that read a book a week, but I am, so that's what I'm taking on this year. So.
And would that be fiction or nonfiction?
Well, because I write nonfiction, I've been reading fiction for pleasure more frequently. But yeah, it would include nonfiction as well. But for now, it's fiction.
Yeah, I know for myself, I limit myself to the fiction books at certain times of the year, like vacation time, because otherwise I get sucked right in. I can't put it down.
Yeah. Well, and, I tend not to read nonfiction because it just feels like an extension of my work, right? So rather than having it be a way for me to relax and unwind, it just feels like, oh, I just did this all day. So, for me to read this before bed. But that could also just be an excuse, right? So that's why I take on fiction, just because I've almost completely let that slide since I started doing this full time. So.
Well, Karen, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day for this interview. And you've shared so many gleaning thoughts of, I hope it ignites someone's passion out there, that they know that they have this book in them, because everyone does have a story. Do you have any final words of wisdom you would love to share with our audience? And also, how can they stay in touch with you?
Oh, sure. Well, you can stay in touch with me. I'm pretty much all over the internet. So feel free to email me at Karen@KarenRowe.com, KarenRowe.com. I love to hear people's book stories. So feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. I'm also on Instagram at KSRowe, ROWE. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I also have a website, KarenRowe.com, and a website called BookWritingMaster.com. So you can find me easily, I feel like. So that's where you can find me. My word of advice, I guess, is that if you have been thinking that you have a book in you, to just start answering that call, to listen, and you will be guided for whatever your next action is. And the last thing I'll say is, like, you're writing your book doesn't have to look like how you think it will, right? If you think it's going to be hard, take on maybe, what if it was easy? What if it was the most pleasurable experience I ever had? And even that shift in context could clear some space for you to take the next action towards that goal.
One of the greatest things that I've learned about the book process is a book is always ready when it's ready.
Yes.
You can't force a book to be
That's
ready
true.
before it's time.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Karen, very much for coming on the show, and for everyone listening in on the Millionaire Woman Show, where we talk about leadership, business, and human potential to help you live rich from the inside out. We'd love for you to go over to iTunes or wherever you're listening to this from, or even in YouTube. Give us a 5-star high five, write us a review. But we'd also love to hear about how this podcast has impacted you. Has it influenced you to jump in and start writing that book? Has it made you shift from thinking about traditional publishing to actually self-publishing? We want to know, because this is what inspires this podcast, is you. So thank you for joining us. Also, as Muhammad Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And my wish for you is always to go out and have a great